Nana Shastra Vicharanayaka Nipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manya Sharanya Karo Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nandena Mataliko Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Shri Jiva Gopalako Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Shri Jiva Gopalako. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the 3 worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of, because they're absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachade Chatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapacharibhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Yes, so as we've discussed, there are 64 angas of devotional service. Particularly it's Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, but it's in a general sense also. So many of them apply in the general sense. So there are 64, and we are starting this evening with number 54. Number 54. And there's a lot to be discussed, actually, because there is at least an introduction and actually quite a detailed description, really, of the 5 main angas or devotional activities. Worshipping the deity, hearing the Bhagavatam, associating with devotees, chanting the holy names, and living in a sacred place like Mathura, Vrindavan, those places, yeah. So there's a fairly somewhat detailed description of those. So my prediction is that we may not finish chapter 12 this evening, which is fine, because we have time. We have plenty of time. When this week finishes on Friday night, we will then have another 2 full weeks of classes, yeah. And then, of course, revising and the exam. But 2 weeks of classes, so it's 2 weeks and 2 days now left. Right then, so let us just go straight into the subject matter, and Anga number 54 is hearing the revealed scriptures. Now you may, I just mentioned a few minutes ago, actually, about hearing the Bhagavatam as such. This is one of those rules, one of those angas of devotional service, which is repeated. It's going to repeat it. It's actually number 61. Number 61 is hearing Srimad Bhagavatam particularly. But this is broader. It's related, but it's broader. Hearing the revealed scriptures. So yes, if one looks through, then one will see that this is basically about all different types of scriptures, or at least Vedic scriptures, we can say. Let's read the first paragraph here. According to Srila Rupa Goswami, any book which gives enlightenment in the matter of advancing in devotional service is considered to be revealed scripture. Srila Madhvacharya has also defined revealed scriptures as referring to books such as Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas, Upanishads, Vedanta, and any other literature written in pursuance of such revealed scriptures. It means particularly the Vedic literatures and other associated writings, like the writings of great acharyas like that, for example. And in fact, we see that there are verses quoted. There's how many? There's 3. There are 3 verses quoted in this section. 2 of them, the first 2, the one which is quoted in the second paragraph, and then the first one, which is quoted in the second paragraph, they are giving this sort of broader picture. It's not a narrow picture of studying, just say, particularly Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the case we'll see when we reach either tonight or tomorrow, number 61, which is about hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So then, yes, so that in the second paragraph, the scripture which is mentioned, referred to, quoted actually, is Skanda Purana. Oops, let me just get myself organized here. What now? Just a sec. So, right, there we go. So I just had to move something on the screen of the computer. Right, so Skanda Purana. In the Skanda Purana, there is the statement: a person who's constantly engaged in reading literature, enunciating the cultivation of Vaishnava devotional service, is always glorious in human society, and certainly Lord Krishna becomes pleased with him, that person who's constantly reading such literature. A person who very carefully keeps such literature, such literature at home and offers respectful obeisances to it becomes freed from all sinful reactions and ultimately becomes worshipable by the demigods. And then, who is this speaking? 12th canto. Someone is speaking to Narada Muni. My dear Narada, a person who writes Vaishnav literature and keeps such literature at home has Lord Narayan always residing in his house. Just an interesting little detail you may have noticed, that these two verses, among other things, well, along with in this verse writing Vaishnav literature, and in the previous verse it was more like reading Vaishnav literature and keeping such literature in their home. This is something special, keeping such literature in your home. You may know that in the month of Bhadra, which is coming up in a little while, there's one verse in Srimad Bhagavatam which says, if you give a whole Srimad Bhagavatam to someone in the month of Bhadra, but that Bhagavatam should be seated on a golden throne, then you go back to Goloka Vrindavan. Yes. So particularly obviously for the householders, to keep such literature at home is a very special thing. And it sanctifies the home. You know, keeping the literatures, having an altar, perhaps with actual deities, at least pictures of the Lord and parampara, having programs at home like every day, prasadam, these types of things. Turn a house into a temple of the Lord, a sacred place. And then there's a third verse, which is quoted in the same third paragraph, that Srimad Bhagavatam, now this is bringing in Srimad Bhagavatam specifically, but it's the only verse to do that, that Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence of all Vedanta philosophy. Anyone who has become attached in some way or other to the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam cannot have any taste for reading any other literature. In other words, a person who has relished the transcendental bliss of Srimad Bhagavatam cannot be satisfied with mundane writings. Yes, very good. So, devotees, there is a special question here. There's a special question. Interesting. Actually, it's all about Srimad Bhagavatam. So it should really, anyway, it's a special question from this chapter. And the verse about the Bhagavatam as such is coming up in due course in this chapter. But it's referring to, what is this now? Bhagavatam, 7th canto. Oh, I see. 7th canto, chapter 10, verses 43 and 44, purport, from the purport of 7, 10, 43 and 44. Srimad Bhagavatam is filled with descriptions of the characteristics of various devotees, with reference to the service of the Lord. This Vedic literature is called Bhagavatam because it deals with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotee. By studying Srimad Bhagavatam under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master, one can perfectly understand the science of Krishna, the nature of the material and spiritual worlds, and the aim of life. Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam Amalam Puranam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless Vedic literature, as we have discussed in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, simply by understanding Srimad Bhagavatam, one can understand the science of the activities of the devotees, the activities of the demons, the permanent abode and the temporary abode. Through Srimad Bhagavatam, everything is perfectly known. So that's what you got to study. I hope you noted down the verse number, because there's going to be a question on that. All right, let us move on now to number 55, residing in Mathura. And, well, as we just mentioned some minutes ago, 15 minutes ago or whatever, the last of the angas of bhakti, of sadhana bhakti, Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, number 64, is residing in a sacred place like Mathura or Vrindavan. When we get to the end of this chapter, we will mention maybe all, at least quite a lot, of, you could say, apparent duplications. And we've been trying to draw your attention to these things as we've been going on, that there are two considerations. One is that when something is just really important, then it may be repeated for emphasis. In other cases, and actually that is the case with this number 55 residing in Mathura and number 64 residing in Mathura, or a similar holy place like Vrindavan. This is a duplication for the purpose of emphasis. Whereas the second sort of, the way that some point is duplicated is in order to bring out another aspect of the same thing. Just like the one we just read, number 54, about reading the different scriptures. That was about, it mentioned the Bhagavatam, but it mentioned basically all the other Vaishnav Vedic literatures. So, therefore, there's a little bit different perspective from, it's going to be, whatever it is, it's going to be, I think it's verse number 60, whichever verse it is anyway, which is emphasizing the studying Srimad Bhagavatam as such. I think it's 61. Anyway, we'll come to it just shortly. So this 55 and 64 are duplications for the purpose of emphasis, but 54 and, 61, it's the same idea, but there is variation. Because 54 was just the revealed scriptures in general, 61 is Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so that's the idea. Right, so here we are now, residing in Mathura. It's interesting. First of all, there's a quotation from Varaha Purana, an interesting thing to note is that Mathura is very closely associated with Lord Varaha. If you go there, you'll see there's a whole narration about Varaha's presence there. But there are two very important, and at least one of them is extremely ancient, deities of Lord Varaha, and really beautiful. Yes. So anyway, that's just by the way, really. Mathura is associated with Lord Varaha, and the Varaha Purana is quoted. And Mathura is glorified in these two verses, Varaha Purana and then Brahmanda Purana, just in very, very vivid, very strong ways. Any person who becomes attracted to places other than Mathura will certainly be captivated by the illusory energy. Yeah, that's pretty strong. And then Brahmanda Purana says that it's said that all the results of traveling on all the pilgrimages within the three worlds can be achieved simply by touching the holy land of Mathura. In many shastras it is said that simply by hearing, remembering, glorifying, desiring, seeing, or touching the land of Mathura, one can achieve all desires. So, yes, this is for the sake of emphasis. Let's go on to 56. This is interesting. I mean, they're all interesting, but there's some really amazing verses quoted here. First of all, in the first paragraph, let me just, while we're at it, seeing we were just talking about duplication and reasons for duplication. This now, 56, this is a duplication, or pretty much something like a duplication, of number 62, associating with advanced devotees. There's a difference. In number 62 is particularly about very advanced devotees, and this is broader, although it's also talking about advanced devotees. But not to the same degree as number 62. So again, it's a duplication. It would appear to be more for the sake of emphasis, rather than just bringing out a different perspective on relationships with devotees. So anyway, back to the first paragraph. Padma Purana is referred to or quoted, and this is actually famous verse. Some of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with it. It appears, it's quoted here and there by Prabhupada. As far as I can remember, it's quoted in the text of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Aradhananam sarvesham Vishnur aradhanam param tasmat parataram devi tadiyanam samarchanam. And the translation is, let's see. Okay, let's read the translation from Nectar of Devotion. It's very nice. It's Shiva speaking to Parvati. My dear Parvati, there are different methods of worship. And out of all such methods of worship, the worship of the Supreme Person is considered to be the highest. But even higher than the worship of the Lord is the worship of the Lord's devotees. Aha. Yeah. You could say any devotees. Verse 62 is very specifically about very advanced devotees. This is at least a little broader. But it's both. It's a difference of perspective, more inclusive of a greater variety of devotees, but it's also for emphasis. So then, if we look through these other paragraphs here, we find there's some pretty amazing verses about serving the devotees. Let's read a couple more. Let me become a sincere servant of the devotees, but because by serving them, one can achieve unalloyed devotional service unto the lotus feet of the Lord. The service of devotees diminishes all miserable material conditions and develops within one a deep devotional love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then there's a nice verse from Skanda Purana, but let's skip that and read the following one. A similar statement is found in the first canto, 19th chapter, verse 33 of Srimad Bhagavatam. There is no doubt about one's becoming freed from all reactions to sinful activities after visiting a devotee or touching his lotus feet or giving him a sitting place. Even by remembering the activities of such a Vaishnav, one becomes purified along with one's whole family. And what then can be said of rendering direct service to him? And then famous verse, it's actually fairly famous verse, spoken by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, but not in Bhagavad Gita. It's from the Adi Purana, which is an Upa Purana, a secondary Purana. And maybe you know the Sanskrit. How does it go? Anyway, let's just read the translation. My dear Partha, ye me bhakta jana partha, na me bhakta chaye jana, mad bhaktanam chaye bhaktas, te me bhaktatama mataha. My dear Partha, Arjuna, one who claims to be my devotee is not so. Only a person who claims to be the devotee of my devotee is actually my devotee. Yeah. So no one can approach the Lord directly. One can only approach through the devotees. Therefore, in the system of Vaishnava activities, the first duty is to accept a devotee as spiritual master and then render service to him. Maybe let me just tell you a little story. Listen to this, devotees. I'm sure some of you have heard this story before, but it's a really nice story. It's from Bibi Govinda Maharaj. He was in Vrindavan when Srila Prabhupada was going through his whole disappearance pastime. And Bibi Govinda Maharaj, of course, is a very outstanding kirtan singer, bhajan, any sort of singing. He's just one of the very best and most wonderful devotional singers. So in Prabhupada's main room, in his house, just by our temple there in Vrindavan, there was kirtan going on 24 hours a day. And Maharaj was leading kirtan some of the time. And one day, who should come in but one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers named Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, who, Prabhupada had sort of, well, it's not our business now to go into it, but there were sometimes difficulties in his relationships with his godbrothers. But generally, he had a very nice relationship, perhaps the best of all of them, with this Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. Certainly at least one of the very best, if not the best. So in came Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. Prabhupada is lying in his bed on his back with his head propped up a bit, but otherwise he's just lying on his back in bed because he's basically incapacitated. It's just days before Prabhupada left. So in came Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, jumped onto the bed, and started chatting away and talking away enthusiastically like this. Oh, yes, very good, in Bengali. Although he spoke fluent English, but they spoke in Bengali. And Prabhupada, who otherwise had been very, you could say, very solemn, not expressing, not laughing much at all, if at all. In this little discussion with Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, Prabhupada really brightened up and started laughing and said some things. And it was a very nice, jolly exchange, really quite jolly. In the middle of it, Prabhupada stopped and turned to the disciples and said, what is it? What did he say? Tandera charana sevi, bhakta sanevas, janame hoy, e abhilas. My only desire is to serve the devotees, to serve the lotus feet of the devotees, and to live in their association, birth after birth. So Prabhupada said that to his disciples in a very serious way, and then turned back to Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. And again, it was kind of light-hearted, you would say, laughing and smiling, and quite a bit of emotion being displayed. And after a couple of minutes, Prabhupada stopped and looked at the disciples very seriously and said, Tandera charana sevi, bhakta sanevas, janame hoy, e abhilas. My only desire, e abhilas, or abhilash, means my only desire, is Tandera charana sevi, to serve the lotus feet of the devotees, and bhakta sanevas, to live with the devotees, janame hoy, birth after birth. So very seriously, again, a second time Prabhupada said that. And then turned back to Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. And again, it was the same light-hearted, jolly exchange. And then a third time, Prabhupada turned to the disciples, very serious, and said, Tandera charana sevi, bhakta sanevas, janame hoy, e abhilas. Exactly the same thing. So emphasizing it under those circumstances was a very powerful experience for all the devotees who were there. And there's a special question actually from here, and would you believe it's quoting the same verse which we just quoted, or Prabhupada was quoting. It's from Narottam Das Thakur. And it appears if any of you doing Bhakti Shastri, you're going to have to answer some question about this. You can find it in Srimad Bhagavatam 6, 11, 25 purport. 6, 11, 25. Tandira Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanevas Janame Hoy E Abhilash. To serve the Lord and the servants of his servants in the association of devotees is the only objective of a pure, unalloyed devotee. Yeah, okay. So then there's a question based on that translation, specifically that translation of the verse. So you better look it up. It appears in the purport of 6:11:25. And then the final little point Prabhupada makes right at the end, that Srila Rupa Goswami affirms that all the quotations given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu from different scriptures are accepted by the great acharyas and devotees of the Lord. You know, there have been a few verses which, for example, suggested that if you do this or that, you could get one of the Vaishnav liberations, which we also read, you know, that the most elevated devotees are not interested in. And so, you know, you might be a little doubtful, but still, actually, all these quotations are accepted by the big authorities, the biggest. So next is number 57, serving the Lord according to one's position. And it's just a very short little description there, that according to your financial position, or everyone's financial positions, they should observe the different ceremonies and celebrations of the Lord as much as they're able. That's a straightforward sort of idea. Then a nice one, I mean, they're all nice, as we've said, but it's a very nice one. Performing devotional service in Kartik. Kartik is coming. Will I still be in lockdown in Kartik? That is an interesting question. Nothing would surprise me, to be quite honest. But all right, anyway. So there's a nice description here. There's a nice description of how during that month the devotees do different things. They take different vows, and as much as possible they go to Vrindavan or Mathura or some sacred place which is like Vrindavan or Mathura, like the Radharadhanath temple, which is Vrindavan. Yeah. And so this practice of doing some extra devotional activities, making a special effort during Kartik, this is encouraged very strongly actually. Srila Prabhupada said that just as a shop owner who's selling the same products every day, every week, every month, every year. It's just the same, and pretty much for the same prices. But every now and then he decides to have a sale. And when there's a sale, you can go in there and get the usual products, which he's always selling every day, for much less. So Prabhupada made the point that Kartik means Krishna is having a sale. That the same mercy, which is generally available as usual, day in and day out from Krishna, but during Kartik, that same mercy is available much more freely and easily. So it's like Krishna is having a sale. Yeah. And here's a couple of interesting little points. Listen to this. These are not points from the text itself. But anyway, here we go. Jiva Goswami says that if one performs Kartik Vrata in Vrindavan, even without devotion, the Lord will very easily offer his personal service. Jiva Goswami says in Bhakti Sandarbha, O child, well, he quotes a verse, O child, all holy places reside in the month of Kartik, which is eternally dear to Lord Krishna. Whatever pious deeds one performs to please Lord Vishnu during the month of Kartik brings a benefit that is eternal. O Narada, I speak the truth. A person who refuses to follow the vow of this month, which is very dear to Lord Damodar, loses his pious deeds and takes birth as an animal. Haribol. That's someone who doesn't make some special effort, take a special vow during Kartik. In Padma Purana, in Padma Purana is told that in the Kartik Mahatmya is told the story of how, by observing Ekadasi during the month of Kartik, a Brahmin's daughter became Lord Krishna's dear wife, Satyabhama. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. Phew, okay. And then, as Prabhupada quotes here, in Padma Purana, the Lord may offer liberation or material happiness to a devotee, but after some devotional service has been executed, particularly in Mathura during the month of Kartik, the devotees want only to attain pure devotional service unto the Lord. Yes. So the purport is, Prabhupada says, even such unserious persons who execute devotional service in Kartik, in Mathura, they very easily get the Lord's personal service. So that's something you can meditate on for the upcoming Kartik in a few months. All right, let's see here. So now, number 59, observing festivals celebrating the Lord's activities. And we can just note, this is the last one, the last anga or the last rule before we go into the final 5. Just bear that in mind. So, now, we just read, what did we just read? We just read in number, was it 57, I think? Oh, okay, well, 57. Yeah, okay, 57. We just read that we should celebrate the festivals, different ceremonies and celebrations by all means, according to our financial position. So this may appear to be sort of a duplication to some degree, but actually that in the rule number 57 was about observing all Vaishnava festivals. If we look at this one, we'll see that it is basically or mainly focusing on celebrating Janmashtami. Those are the verses given. They're talking, or there's emphasis at least. Yeah, Bhavishya Purana, well, Bhavishya Purana is quoted about observing Janmashtami. So, and actually, the Sanskrit, you know what the Sanskrit name of this rule or anga of devotional service is? It is Shri Janma Din Yatra. That is the actual Sanskrit name of this particular anga of devotional service. So in other words, it is really focused specifically on that. Let's see. Okay. All right. And now this brings us, devotees, to the final 5. And I think just to begin this, we will launch into them tomorrow, like a full discussion. Let me just right now just read the verses. It's verses 90, 91, and 92 of this, what is in fact the second chapter of the first part, the eastern side of the ocean of devotion of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So let's just read exactly how it's put. Shraddha Visheshata Priti Shri Murtir Angri Sevane Srimad Bhagavatartanam Asvado Rasikai Saha Sajatiya Shaye Snigte Sadho Sangha Swato Vare Nama Sankirtanam Shriman Mathura Mandale Stiti. So that means with love and full faith, one should worship the lotus feet of the deity. One should taste the meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of pure devotees. And one should associate with the devotees who are more advanced than oneself and who are endowed with a similar type of affection for the Lord. One should congregationally chant the holy name of the Lord and reside in, well, the verse says Mathura Mandala. Prabhupada says, reside in Vrindavan. So these are those are the 5 as they're very specifically stated by Srila Rupa Goswami. And what should we do? I think we'll just call it a day, and we'll just carry on tomorrow and go into these 5. And really, there's some very interesting points. There's some just really interesting points that come up. So, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.